Top 5 Most Powerful Militaries in the World. For a considerable amount of time, many people believed that a state's major source of power was its military might, sometimes known as its hard power. However, as the Cold War drew to a close, economic might began to emerge as the dominant force. A widespread narrative about the end of history, coupled with the decline in the number of armed conflicts, led to the idea, or hope, that wars would mainly be a thing of the past in the not too distant future. However, according to Ulrike Frank, a senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, military power is on the rise once again. As a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, military clashes, especially those involving the world's greatest powers, have made their way back into the collective psyche of people living in Western Europe. In this video, we will list the top 5 millis in the globe for you to check out. Should we get started? Number 5. Japan. The Japan Self-Defense Forces, often known informally as the Japanese Armed Forces, are the unified de facto armed forces of Japan, having been founded in 1954. They are also known as the Japanese Armed Forces, the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force, the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force, and the Japan Air Self-Defense Force are the components that make up the Self-Defense Forces of Japan. They are under the command of the Ministry of Defense, and the Prime Minister is the overall commander of the armed forces. The two things that can restrict the military are its budget and its legal standing. The amount of money that will be spent on the military by Japan in 2020 places it first in the world. Over the past few years, the Japanese Self-Defense Force, JSDF, has participated in international peacekeeping operations with the United Nations. The escalating tensions with North Korea have rekindled the discussion on the standing of the Japanese Self-Defense Forces and their place in Japanese society. Since 2010, the Japan Self-Defense Force has shifted its attention from countering the former Soviet Union to the People's Republic of China. Additionally, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the JSDF has also considered the Russian Federation to be a major threat. Other priorities for the JSDF include increasing military cooperation with Australia, India, Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and purchasing new equipment and hardware. Number 4. India. The Indian Army is the land-based branch of the Indian Armed Forces and the largest component of the armed forces overall. The President of India is considered to be the supreme commander of the Indian Army. However, the Chief of Army Staff, COS, who is a 4-star general, is the professional leader of the Indian Army. 2 officers have been promoted to the ceremonial position of Field Marshal, which is a 5-star rank and carries a high level of honor. This rank was bestowed upon them alongside the formation of the Indian Army in 1895 were the long-established presidency troops of the East India Company. These armies were eventually integrated into the Indian Army in 1903. Before independence, the princely realms each maintained their forces, which were later incorporated into the National Army. The histories of the many units and regiments that make up the Indian Army are varied. These units and regiments have taken part in a variety of conflicts and campaigns all over the world, accumulating several battle and theater honors both before and after independence. The Indian Army's principal responsibility is to uphold national security and unity, to defend the country against both external aggression and domestic dangers, and to keep the peace and preserve security within its borders. It carries out humanitarian relief operations after natural disasters and other disturbances, such as Operation Surya Hope, and the government can also demand it to deal with threats from within the country. Along with the Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force, it is one of the most important elements of India's national might. The Army has been involved in 5 wars, 4 of which were fought against the neighboring country of Pakistan and 1 of which was fought against China. Operation Vijay, Operation Meghdoot, and Operation Cactus are some of the other significant operations that have been carried out by the Army. Number 3. China. Under Xi Jinping's leadership, China's armed forces are becoming a genuine threat to those of the United States. The People's Liberation Army now possesses hypersonic missiles, which can go through the majority of defenses and are a technology that the United States is still working on creating. Its assault drones can swarm to disable communication networks. China has more Navy ships than the United States has, and this summer it debuted its third aircraft carrier, the country's first one to be planned and constructed entirely within its borders. It is just behind the United States in terms of its defense budget. The United States military has just under 1.4 million active duty personnel, whereas China's military has just under 2 million active duty personnel. The question that has been posed to Mr. Xi, which he has done so in a public setting, is whether or not those forces are prepared to fight. Since a brief border conflict with Vietnam in 1979, China has not been involved in a full-scale war. In contrast to the American armed forces, which have spent the majority of the last 2 decades fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Chinese armed forces have almost no combat experience. This lack of experience has been referred to by some Chinese authorities as a peace illness. Mr. Xi has made it a priority to find a solution that does not involve actual conflict, especially as he strives to prepare the country for a potential showdown with the United States. Number 2. Russia. The armed forces of the Russian Federation, also known as the Russian Armed Forces, are the military of Russia. They have at least 2 million people serving in reserve capacities, making them the second largest military force in the world in terms of active duty members. In addition to the ground forces, the Navy, and the aerospace forces, they have 3 independent arms of service that are known: the Strategic Rocket Forces, the Airborne Forces, and the Special Operations Forces. Their branches are referred to as the Ground Forces, the Navy, and the Aerospace Forces. Russia had the 5th highest military spending in the world in 2021, dedicating around $65.9 billion of its total budget to the military. This placed Russia in 5th place globally. The Russian armed forces have the world's 2nd biggest fleet of ballistic missile submarines, and they are responsible for the upkeep of the greatest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the world. Even though Russia is considered to have a strong military, as stated in a variety of studies, flaws have been identified in the country's ability to perform effectively in the war on both the tactical and operational scales. According to several sources, Russia's ability to effectively project hard power has suffered significantly as a direct result of the pervasive corruption that exists within the Russian armed forces. Number 1. United States of America. The United States Army, USA, is the arm of the United States Armed Forces that is responsible for land operations. It is one of the 8 uniformed services that make up the United States of America, and the United States Constitution refers to it as the Army of the United States. The United States Marine Corps is the oldest and most senior component of the United States Armed Forces in terms of order of precedence. The United States Army is a branch of the United States Uniformed Services that is a component of the Department of the Army. The Department of the Army is one of the 3 military departments that fall under the purview of the United States Department of Defense. It is the largest branch of the armed forces, and as of the end of the fiscal year 2020, the projected end strength for the regular Army, USA, was 480,893 soldiers. The Army National Guard, ARNG, had 336,129 soldiers, and the U.S. Army Reserve, USAR, had 188,703 soldiers. The combined component strength of the United States Army was 1,005,725 soldiers. Source: Missing citation, to fight and win our nation's conflicts by delivering swift, persistent ground dominance throughout the full range of military operations and the spectrum of conflict. In support of combatant commanders is the mission of the United States Army, which is a branch of the armed services. We appreciate your viewing, and we hope you enjoyed the video. How was the video? Did you enjoy it? Post your feedback in our comments section below and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more updates.